Hey guys, welcome back to the Laurence McKenna on LFC channel, where we've just watched that PSG team do that to Liverpool. The real conclusion is, well, first of all, Liverpool out of the Champions League. But the real question about this is, what does it mean for the rest of the season? What does it mean for this Liverpool team who have done so well and were so dominant up until this point? There are a lot of conclusions, and I think it's time that we go through some of them, because towards the business end of the season, especially with everything that we still got on the line, I genuinely think this Liverpool team is still learning a lot of lessons. One thing I love is, oh right, okay, so the cop are booing the PSG team who are going towards, what's Hakimi doing? What a classless little, look at that. Hakimi went to the middle, the centre circle, and decided to take the flag down there. Weird. And quite provocative behaviour, really. PSG haven't exactly been the classiest side, but let's be honest, you don't have to be in the Champions League when you've got that amount of cash. Let's go and make some conclusions. See you guys back in the hotel.
Right guys, we're back in the hotel. We've had a little bit of time to think about it, had a little time to discuss it, had a little bit of time to process what was good, what was great, and what was really high quality in this game. And first off, I just want to say PSG were fantastic over these two legs. I think PSG's quality has shone through. You can see the team is at a very advanced stage, or at least at a very positive stage of their development overall as a squad. They're full of confidence. They really want to take everyone on. And I think over the two legs, it's bear in mind, you know, as a Liverpool fan, it's worth saying they deserved it. I think they deserved it by quite a long way as well in this one. That's not necessarily to say that Liverpool should be damned, or that Liverpool, you know, it's worth having this inquest and throwing everyone under the bus. You don't have to go one way or the other, even though after the terrible first leg, everyone expected it to go the other way and Anfield for Liverpool to show out. And I can talk a little bit about why none of that happened, and why, to an extent, being at the game in these last two games has actually been really important. A, for me as a fan, but B, for the analysis that we give on this channel, because I think we're seeing some slight detail differences in what I'm hearing when I watch other people's analysis. Broadly, I think there's amazing analysis on YouTube, right? I think, you know, you can obviously point out all of the brilliant things about PSG, the movement, the ball movement, the technical ability, the being first to everything. There was a lot of frustration around Anfield tonight. PSG just overall looking a little bit fresher. And it's worth shouting that out as well. They're able to rest people almost on a weekly basis, on the regular, because in that league, they don't have the same level of physical challenge that, say, a Liverpool do have. And whilst that sounds like an excuse, it's actually just that PSG have had that for quite some time. And Liverpool this season have certainly been working with a core set of players and then rotating other people in and out. And I think it's fair to say that quite a few people could have done without playing 120 minutes before going into a cup final of the weekend and before going into this final run-in, because, you know, as much as a lot of people are talking about a self-assured title win, you know, job not done is the point. PSG, some people are going to say that PSG fully nullified Salah. I think for the first 15, 20 minutes of this Anfield match, that certainly was proven not to be the case. Because Salah came out and was on the front foot. He created two amazing chances that I think he really should have put one at least away. And Anfield was kind of expectant that he would put at least one of those away. If he'd have put one of those away, you wonder how differently the tie would have gone, because could we have locked things down a little bit more? Could we have been a little bit more conservative if we got there, snatch a goal early, and PSG have to play to us, because then you can afford to counter-attack? But at the same time, the changes that Slot made were clearly being worked out by PSG as they went, slightly expected, but then you still need to play within the systems that Liverpool set out. But it became quite formulaic very quickly for Liverpool. The passing sequences on the right-hand side between Salah, between Szoboszlai, and between Trent felt a little bit stilted at times, even though there were plenty of periods where it seemed to work. And actually, as simple as it looks to us now, because we're so used to watching this Liverpool side, there are times where it's quite effective. We just really lack a finisher up front. We lack someone who's in that position, who's makes defenses fear them. We have a few players in this team that are playing anywhere between 60 and 80% at any one time. And that ranges from Trent Alexander-Arnold, who I don't think is playing if he's not playing injured, he's not playing 100% fit. Put it that way. Sprints sometimes, great, but is he rushing around like he was in previous years with the number of minutes on his body? No. Is he the same sprightly player for a full 90 that we felt he was in previous years? The answer is no. Is that a criticism? Also no. The same goes for Jota. I think Jota's playing at 80, maybe at a push. I think at a push 80% capacity right now, because I find it hard to see how he's playing above that. There are plenty of times where we want him to push, we want him to press. Of course, he had to drop a little bit deeper to negate the Vitinha element this evening and to win the ball back. We definitely limited Vitinha's touches a lot more tonight. But at the same time, I'm not really sure that it's worth taking away that edge from Jota. And there were times where it felt like we needed someone in that space, because Salah/Diaz is looking up in the box and going, well, where is that person? And there's times when you think it could be Szoboszlai, it could be Jones, it could be whoever if we'd have brought those people on. There's times where you want it to be McAllister. McAllister was so busy tonight. If I was to pick two men of the match, I'd go Ibrahim Konate and McAllister probably tonight. Konate, just for his dominance out on the field. In the stadium, it was really well reacted to, and it was something that the Anfield crowd could really get up with. And on the other side of that, I think McAllister was very, very busy. And again, in the midfield, one thing I think we really lack right now is a Milner or Hendo type figure who's willing to go out there and get in the opposition faces constantly throughout the game, be an ever-present voice, be an ever-present leader in the way that we had in previous years. Not that I'm saying that anyone's not a good player. It's just that kind of like that crunchy element that really we lacked in the first Champions League final in the Klopp era against Real Madrid. Got to the Champions League final, won, and then again, like, you could see us working through that. We had leaders, we had crunchers in the team who did us good. I think that was a figure that we really had in the side. And I think at the moment, we've got a few people growing into their position, a few people learning their technical requests from Slot, and that's all fair enough. We've overachieved, I genuinely believe, this season to a large extent, which is an achievement that I think a lot of people are trying to take away from this Liverpool side. Doesn't mean that they're a bad team, doesn't mean they're the worst team in the world, doesn't mean that they're not on an upward trajectory. It just means that there has been an overachievement, and what could be, some people will regard as a new manner to bounce, I regard as a freshness, a change, a good reaction to some very good tactics from this new manager, and something we can build on. Am I disappointed to go out of the Champions League? Of course, because if you get through against PSG, and let's face it, we got them one all over the two leg. You can say all you want about them being a much better side. It's got to come to fruition. And I get, like, their XG in this game was actually higher than the XG that they had at their home stadium. Our XG was also massively improved. It couldn't be much worse, frankly, but our XG was massively improved. But there were just too many times where we needed someone in that area, rushing into that area to finish something. And essentially, it was a game of two goalkeepers here, or a tie of two goalkeepers. Alisson in the first leg, Donnarumma in the second leg, and I'll talk about the penalties in a minute, but frustrating Anfield. And Anfield tonight, I think, was, to an extent, like, I've got to be honest, I've seen Anfield more alive. I've seen Anfield more in full voice, more in its best voice. I've seen that for Dortmund. I've seen that for City. I've seen that for other teams. I think at the moment, we're still finding that voice again in this period, in this era. But also, I'll be honest, guys, like, and I mean this in the nicest way, I think stadiums should be places where different cultures can mix. There were a lot of PSG fans in the Liverpool end tonight. Like, and again, I'm all for tourists. I'm all for people coming to see the amazing Anfield atmosphere. But I'm not for opposition fans being in the Liverpool end. And, obviously to a huge extent, that goes down to ticket scalpers and people who just want to make an upgrade on that. But I'm waiting in the line at half time. There's a full family of Paris Saint-Germain fans standing right behind me, very openly mocking that they're in the Liverpool main stand and sort of joking about it. There's then two PSG fans immediately ahead of me. A PSG fan pushes past me. It's not necessarily that I'm like, oh, we can't mix, I get that it's now, it's a different level of competition. It's a different level of fandom. It's a different level of all this stuff. And again, I'm all for mixing cultures in different ways. But also there's a time and a place. And frankly, I don't think a football stadium is the time to do it. And I think when you've got two quite partisan teams, I don't think it's a good look. And I don't think it's a good look that they can get so many of these tickets, most probably, let's be honest, because they're so expensive, because it's so difficult for someone who's probably on the breadline as a Liverpool fan, which, let's face it, there will be that in every English stadium, to afford a couple of £100 for a PSG ticket, which is it's probably one of our highlight ties of the season in the Champions League, is knockout stages is a highlight, and whether you go through or not, it's a highlight. And I think it impacts the voice of Anfield. I think it impacts if I'm next to five guys who are not singing You'll Never Walk Alone, and two guys further down the row, if you've got a row of 50 people, that's almost 20% of the row that is, 14, 15% of the row that is not singing. That when we then need a reaction, we don't have that voice in the stadium. Now, that's not the same in every row in the stadium. There was a dad behind me with his kid tonight. There were plenty of older Liverpool fans in front of me, next to me. There were people who, I will not understand this logic, but, encouraging Nunes and having a go at Salah tonight, which the mind boggles. But, fair enough. If you pick how you support, I guess. It's not what I would have chosen to do, but okay. And then we get into the performance that the Liverpool team put in. There was a lot for us to react to this evening at Anfield. There was a lot of more positives than I think the away fans would have had a couple of weeks, even 1 week ago when I was in Paris. We looked a lot less passive, but you could also see that there were still elements that Slot was holding on to from that first leg of allowing PSG to play their game, of allowing PSG into certain areas and then shutting them down when we got to those areas. And at times that worked. But at times we also played ourselves into trouble. A couple of too cheeky passing combinations, just way too cute. A couple of too cute style of dribbling, which clearly we were told to dribble a little bit more into the main middle area, because obviously they compress that area, and then it means that the passing in those areas is very limited. You don't want to necessarily do that. It becomes a lot more direct when you then dribble into that area, pass it out wide, and then come back in. But it was that end product of the coming back in. And then in that first 15 minutes, we created so much, we allowed Salah in so many great positions, blah, 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 that I think there was an expectation from Anfield that we would score. And there was honestly, it felt like a goal was coming, because PSG looked a bit more discombobulated than they did in the first leg. They looked a little bit more confused, but we didn't have that element of surprise here where it was like, well, we can bring on this guy and see what happens. And to an extent, as the game went on, PSG grew into it. They learned that they could frustrate the home crowd, which I think, is something you do very quickly in the Champions League if you're a quality side like PSG. But also they learned that, the crowd would quieten down after a little while, and it became a bit more call and response rather than the whole stadium going as one. And in previous games, I think it had been a bit more call and the whole stadium was as one. Now, granted, again, I think this Liverpool side know that they're tired, or that they are tiring at this point in the season. A rest would be very welcome for, I think, a lot of these legs. And I also think there are a few people, given Salah's tears at full time and these kind of things, who still are unsure as to what's going on next, but also want to make the most of the end of the twilight of their career, or the last 5 years, however many years Salah's got left. And they know that some of these are good chances. They know that being beaten by PSG, as good as PSG are, Liverpool on their day are also able to put in a good performance. I think that's where a lot of the glee has come from, is that Liverpool didn't really step up in this tie. It's not necessarily it's terribly misjudged. It's just that actually a lot of the best laid plans from Slot and the team didn't go to plan, didn't come to fruition. Some of the finishing really wasn't there. And I've seen the headlines. I've not been able to watch other people's reviews yet, because obviously I've been walking back with the guys and stuff, but from what I can tell, it seems like there's a lot of criticism of our front line, which I think is probably very valid. Certainly when it comes to Nunes. Tonight, there were a couple of times what felt like, in the moment, appeared to him to be very smart things to do, become very ill-judged decisions and put a lot more pressure on us, but also waste what feel like good breakaway chances. And that's not just Nunes, but there were a couple of times where it was very clearly Nunes. There were a couple of times where we were through with the ball and we just didn't make the right decision. We didn't make the pass in time, or they cut off a passing line lane. And again, credit to PSG. I think PSG deserve a lot of credit in this for just cutting Liverpool off. But again, I think they're a little further ahead in their development. They're a little further ahead in what's being rebuilt, and they're a little further ahead in the time they've had with just everything going on there, because they've got a weekly pre-season in Ligue 1, or at least a semi-weekly pre-season in Ligue 1 with a lot of those sides. They're able to rest a lot of those players. And that's fair enough, right? It's the nature of the Champions League, guys. And you can't moan about it, though it's worth pointing out. Salah again. Some people are talking about Salah getting shut down or whatever, and the memes are there. He created chances early on. So saying that you fully shut down that guy, I still don't think is true. Am I disappointed by his performance? Of course. Broadly kept him quiet? Yes. Is this why a lot of people on the continent will try to deny him a Champions League performance-based Ballon d'Or? Yes. And I think that's where the disappointment comes for me, that I think I wanted the team to play out for Salah, for Van Dijk, for everyone else in the team who was more senior, because realistically, these are their last 2 or 3 runs at the Champions League, and having one is good. But I think Salah knows there's a good coach here, there's a good team, we should be capitalising. Get through against PSG, you're in against Bruges or Aston Villa, then you're against Real Madrid, then you're against Barcelona most probably, if you were to go all the way to the final. And ultimately, obviously, I'd much rather lose to the eventual champions than I would the other way around. But I think that's the problem, right? We lost to a very good side, and the side who were probably a little bit further ahead in their development than Liverpool are. We also lost out in midfield tonight. There are a number of kind of weird decisions made. The dribbling was one of them, but there are a couple of times where a pass wasn't quite made, or it felt a little bit sloppy on that right-hand side. The left-hand side still feels very stilted. I don't feel there's that same chemistry between Diaz and Robertson, even though they're both great players, even though they both do great things. The chemistry isn't quite as fluent and efficient on that side. I'm not quite sure why there isn't the overlapping, underlapping variation that we saw earlier on in the season. Could be down to mobility, could be down to tactical. I think it's probably more tactical than it is mobility. And I think that's frustrating to watch. Diaz looked quite isolated at times. Again, similar to what happened in either Man City or Real Madrid game earlier this season. Diaz was just looking a little bit isolated, and I wasn't quite sure why. But again, if that's a tactic, I'm very happy to defer to that. Van Dijk, I thought, was very untroubled. Obviously, there's the first goal, but apart from that, relatively untroubled. We kept a lot of their guys much, much quieter. And Konate, again, I thought was man of the match. Alisson was good. Not the same performance as the previous match. If anything, I think Donnarumma put in that level of performance tonight. But overall, PSG, again, edged it for me. So, fair enough. The Nunez sub, the Jota coming off element, shows that we need someone else in the side. It just shows we need another element. I would even have felt more comfortable than bringing Nunez on to push Salah through the middle, Harvey Elliott or whoever just behind him, Chiesa one side, Diaz or Gakpo the other, and just try and get something in there. I know Salah's obviously a very effective winger, but even then, let Chiesa just float around in the middle, see what happens. Where's the trust for him in this? Fair enough. Than have Nunez on. There are many times where the benefit comes. One of the things is, what if he'd have been whistled in the previous game for the handball that was allegedly there? Fair enough, but it takes away a moment that Nunez would have had. The frustration sets in, and the frustration set in fairly early at Anfield tonight with Nunez. There was a lot of moaning and groaning when he had his head down. He lost the ball in a couple of dribbles, got the ball caught under his feet, was caught out on the ball. Again, my real point with Nunez is, and I think he's a fantastic guy, fantastic, figure to have at the club, but not the long term for Liverpool, because frankly, no one looks at Nunez when he comes on and goes, I fear that guy. It's why he can sometimes operate in the shadows or in between these, but he's not feared by other players. He's not feared when my number 9 comes on, I want them to be feared by the opposition. It's that simple for me. That's the bare minimum, I think. And some people say, well, the role has changed. Guys, the peak of the role that we've seen in recent years at Liverpool is Bobby Firmino. Bobby was feared in the Premier League, in the Champions League, everywhere, because he was a silent assassin, he was a smiling assassin, and he was a great player. But he also had players bounce off him. Tonight, I've seen Darwin bounce off a number of players, just get not owned, but sort of schooled in what was Champions League level. And it didn't feel good enough, frankly, from them by the end of this game. There wasn't enough focus on. That's a wrong way to start that sentence. There wasn't enough cohesive vision from the side by the end of the game to put together counters, and Anfield was very easily frustrated. Also, mainly because come the end of the game, the frustration was the atmosphere had dipped a little bit. I don't think it ever peaked in Anfield. I think it got very good, but I don't think it ever peaked. I don't think we're setting like all-time records this evening. And then during the penalty shootout, I was very nervous. Let's get on to the penalty shootout, because again, I think Liverpool did well to kind of get there in the first place, but at the same time, we should have put PSG 2-0 down and just made them come out and fight for it. And I would have appreciated that. I would have also felt that would have been a much more viable game plan, and it probably was, but we just didn't get it. And we had them then rest, or like the rest possession, and it allowed them back into the game. They got back into the game, and from there on out, it became a much more even battle, which we just didn't want to get into, especially after they scored that opening goal. Anyway, penalty kicks. Donnarumma is a specialist. Alisson's also very good, but I think Donnarumma is famous for his penalty kicks, or the penalty kick dynamic with him. But again, if we're looking at penalty order, we took a couple of good penalty guys off because they were tired. Fair enough. Again, can't make excuses for that. But what we also did was bring a couple of people on, like Darwin Núñez, where you go, all right, you're on number 9. And number 9, it's this simple, has to step up and score his penalty. It's that simple. I can, to an extent, forgive him and Curtis Jones, because obviously there are players I want to support them through to the end of the season. But Jones is a midfielder. Even then, I'd say Jones has a better penalty than he put away there. And I also think Salah's penalty seemed very simple. PSG certainly got into our heads tonight over the ends thing. If it had been at the Kop end, maybe it's a slightly different result. But also, I'm not sure it is, to be honest. I think, maybe there's a different feeling. But we never quite peaked in the feeling in stadium tonight. I'm just being honest in what I observed. There were good moments. There were positive moments. There were moments where there was call and response. Never quite peaked as Anfield. Never quite got to that fever pitch that I think we've remembered in previous years. And that is a real source of frustration for me. And then Donnarumma saved both those penalties. People started leaving because they were so frustrated after both those penalties were missed, which I think is obviously fair enough. Like, if you realise 2 penalties missed, you're most probably on your way home, right? But the frustration was that there wasn't that atmosphere to bring us back. And there was chance of Alisson. I was trying to get that going as well with a number of other people, and it worked. I was following others. Obviously, I'm not the first person chanting it. But it didn't feel threatening. It didn't feel like Anfield sort of imposed itself in the way that it needed to. And that really frustrated me. Like, I've seen it in full voice. I've seen it feeling good. And I'll be honest, it feels like it's because tickets are sold on to PSG fans. And as much as people can say and pay tribute, pay lip service to, oh, well, Anfield's a great atmosphere. Of course, on TV, it's always a good atmosphere because they turn up the mics in the right places at the right times. It's about being in stadium. And always I find that there is a really good atmosphere, but very rarely do I find it's as hostile or as charged as it needs to be. It's not a criticism again. It's probably an observation which can be addressed, but also comes and goes because not everyone is coming to all those big games, etc., etc. Liverpool deserve to go out of this one. I think the real goal this season was to get top 4, which, inshallah, we've got. It was also to go further in a trophy, not burn out, find the limitations of the squad, which we definitely have, which is Darwin Núñez, our lack of rotation in wingers on the right-hand side and also through the middle in terms of attackers. Harvey Elliott, by the way, was pretty good when he came on tonight, so I was relatively impressed by him. I also thought Szoboszlai had some good touches and shows those arrogant moments, which I think are not as good as having the imposer, but kind of bring you up to that same level and sort of go, hey, we're as good as you. Technically, we're a very good side. Fair enough. I think McAllister and Gravenberch, there were times where he was great. There was times where he sort of switched off or just the game sort of passed him by because he was further down the pitch and just needed to get back, and also is very demanded upon to fill in multiple different areas. And I can kind of understand when he gets caught in between a couple of different areas. That makes sense. It's what the opposition are almost trying to do, and sometimes it's effective, it works. The subs seemed a little late at times for me. Fair enough. But broadly, I think Slot got the game right and got the tie in the second leg much righter than he did. PSG came in thinking, oh, we're going to beat these Scousers. And you saw the comments from Vitinha. I love that kind of thing, but I also hate that kind of thing. And I think broadly, you knew how confident they were, put it that way, because they're a good, very, very, very good side who have had good rest and good recuperation, and it's served them well. Having said that, I think if Liverpool are a little bit sharper, if Liverpool are a little bit earlier on in their season, I think there's a much more even game there. And, as much as saying, oh, we were much more scared of Arsenal or whoever, I get it, obviously. I think this PSG side are I think there's an element of disrespect to this PSG team. The Hakimi thing he did with the flag post game, I get might be entertaining to your fans. I broadly quite like the PSG ultras just because of their politics, but I didn't really like the gesture, and it was done. I saw it before I showed you on camera. It felt like it was done towards the cop in a kind of like charged way, and I don't know. I feel like if that's done live in the game, there's a yellow card there, or in the Premier League, there certainly is. There's a celebration thing. Not that I think that's a good idea, but I get when people are zealous. I get when they're excited. I get when they're all these things. It didn't feel, again, PSG are a hard side to admit that they're good because the way that they win, the way they speak about themselves doesn't feel all that classy and doesn't feel all that sort of humble. So you don't want to almost admit that they were a good team because you don't want to give them that satisfaction. And the same goes for the way I've seen them win tonight. It doesn't make it an easy loss to swallow because of the way they act afterwards, because of the way they kind of swagger around. And I think maybe they obviously thought, well, they had the experience of the previous Champions League and whatever. It was a very different experience, obviously, but they had that previous experience as a PSG squad. Not that all that squad still exists, but some of them still do. And I think that some of them saw that as exercising those demons, which is fair enough. At the same time, I still don't think that's very classy from McKenna. And I wouldn't want my own players to go to the middle and do that. I don't think he was joking. I don't think it was one of those things where it's like, oh, he's just kidding, so let's all just chill. It was a very charged thing to do, and it felt like a very sort of disrespectful element after what was a very good quality second leg. That's my only kind of gripe, I guess. My other gripe, if I am to pick one out, would be the ref. I didn't feel there was a particular level of balance in the game this evening. There were some very clear fouls on Liverpool. And again, I think Liverpool should be better than that. But there's a real issue in, hey, why aren't you calling some of these? There was very clear fouls sometimes, very clear moments where it was clear that they'd done something negative to a Liverpool player. And it was called very quickly on PSG players, very slowly, if at all, on Liverpool players. And finally, there was a lot of time wasting. We time wasted in the first leg, but this felt like even more. And I think the Champions League probably have to do something about that, not only in the first leg, but in the second leg as well, because realistically, it slows the product down a little bit. And in the second leg, you want that regularity and the forcefulness of the home crowd. That was never really a thing that the referee took into account. And to an extent, I felt there was an advantage at home for PSG, and I felt like we didn't quite get the Anfield advantage ever really working. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. I'd be interested to know. I think we've at this point in the season, we know where we're going to sign new players. We know what's going to move and change in the next 2 to 3 transfer windows. It will be Nunez. It will be another left back, because I think I'd love to keep Robbo and bring someone else in as an overstudy or understudy, whatever I want to call it. I think it will be a new right back. Just someone who's consistently fit. Probably one more centre back, one more central midfielder who can play in the central midfield deep pivot. And for now, I'd be happy with that, apart from obviously the striker element with Nunez. So it's just a whole new spine, but it isn't a whole new spine. There is a lot of effectiveness in there, right? And a lot of positions where if we improve them, I think we'll be a much, much stronger side. This is slot 1.0, possibly 2.0 at this point. It's really slot 1. It's slot 1.5 at this point. And I think a huge part of it was tiredness and, just minutes in the legs for a lot of these guys. I can forgive that. I can be reasonable about that. Some of the approach, I think, will get panned. I think that's a little bit unfair. I think it's a little bit unreasonable. I think it's a little bit myopic. But overall, yeah, we deserve to go out, guys. It's that simple. And PSG were a very, very good side. And PSG, if they continue to play that way in the Champions League, would definitely be, in my mind, one of the strongest contenders alongside Barcelona and a couple of other big names. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. I'll chat to you again tomorrow during the day, and we're going to do a few more reviews and sort of go through the headlines. But I'll chat to you in a while. Much love.